Welcome to Red Bull Music Festival in Moscow. And we're about to welcome a filmmaker whose work is really unlike a lot of filmmakers working today. He became recognized early on for his takeaway shows, which were these spontaneous music videos filmed on the streets around Paris, his home city. But for the past 6 or 7 years, he's basically been a nomad, I guess, traveling to dozens of different countries and making literally hundreds of films. And typically they explore things like traditional music and folklore, but also religious experience, mystical experience, the relations between all of these things. A lot of the music that he's collected on his travels, he's released on his record label, Petites Planètes. And I think he's going to have a lot of interesting things to show us today and talk to us about. So please welcome Vincent Moon.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you in Moscow. I hope you're having a good time. And we're going to be here together for a little hour, I guess. Yeah?
We'll have time for some questions at the end, so have a think. Before we get deeply into it, I wanted to ask you a bit about your background, because I think you studied photography, right? And I wanted to ask a little bit about this approach that you have of recording in one take. This seems to be something that runs through all of your films. So where does that come from? Why do you operate in that way?
I guess from the beginning of my research into images, actually true, I studied photography at first when I was in Paris and I was 18, 19 years old. I really didn't know anything. I didn't grow up in an artistic environment or anything. And it's pretty late in my teenage years that I got interested in music and cinema and so on. But when I got interested in that, I got pretty much obsessed, and I went full on. And I decided to devote things, and for like almost 10 years, from 18 to 26, let's say, while living in Paris, I would basically spend my entire time going out and checking stuff, going to museums, going to concerts, going to cinemas, and trying to see and hear everything. And my visual relationship started around that time when I started to make photography. And early on, from the very beginning, my relationship to photography was extremely DIY, extremely street photography, very influenced by William Klein, Robert Frank, Joseph Koudelka, and Daido Moriyama and all those kind of like photographers from the 20th century, very much in a black and white actually aesthetic, quite far from where I am sort of now. And little by little I realized that what I wanted was that incredible freedom of basically having a little a camera in my pocket and going to the street and basically becoming a photographer. Just like that. I didn't have to have more than a bigger team or a bigger like form of production to do that. And very quickly I switched towards being attracted, actually completely like devoured by music. And I wanted to get closer to music, and I started to like take photos of musicians actually. And little by little I started to basically find a way to bridge that those still images towards a moving form of image. And I guess that early on, actually, even in the photography I was interested about, there was a lot of movements, even though it was always one image, in a sense. I'm talking especially about the work of people like Antoine Dagata, I don't know if you know him, his work, or Michael Ackerman, like sort of like turn of the century, apocalyptic type of like relationship to society and so on. And I wanted to approximate that movement in an image. And I realized that the cinema I was sort of like referencing that I was crazy about, and I'm talking about basically simply things like people like Tarkovsky or Kubrick, or this aesthetic of cinema was often very much based on long takes, you know, take Bellatar, Miklos Yankso, and all those people. I was really obsessed with what we call in French the plan séquence. Unfortunately, there is not a good translation in English for that way to explain. This plan séquence was basically also a way I realized for me to simplify my relationship to the subject, my relationship to reality, to try to to keep that sort of like unbroken moment. And basically, little by little, I developed a way to dance, I guess, with the subject. And it became a matter very quickly. Early on, my understanding of cinema was basically based on this. It was like basically the meeting of images. Like I was coming from photography, but suddenly there was a sound aspect, which was also my obsession for music. And there was a third aspect, which was basically, I would call it movement in space. How do you move in a social space? And how do you create certain harmony with your surroundings? And I guess it was basically on those, with those very first ideas I started to make films. But I didn't have time to think much more because I was making a lot of films, and every film, little by little, would sort of like give me a clue on where to go next. So I was using this ability to make a lot of films in a short time to progress. And because I was publishing all my work since the very beginning. I was publishing all the work on internet, and I'm still publishing all my work on internet for free under Creative Commons license, and it's very important. That's why, in a sense, I'm much more present on internet than in film festivals and so on. I try to play another game. I try to kind of like expand how much can we use, and I guess our talk will have a lot to do with this. How much can we use those digital tools to change the rules and to basically explore new ways to create simply, you know, and to relate to each other. And then little by little, yeah, I guess I started to create that and work around this language of those long shots unbroken, which would basically sort of create, and I would realize that later, I guess would create in the eye of the viewer something like an hypnotic type of relationship, where I would not basically try to create this kind of like very cut, very impressive type of film, where you, from the first second, you're like, whoa, you're like grabbed in an intense way. But it takes a little bit more of time to get into my films, maybe, you know, 1-2 minutes of attention before you get into it, you know. And the desire, just to finish on that, was that with this technique, language of long takes, I would basically try to make the technique disappear, you know, and at some point you forget there's a camera and you just stare into it, you know.
That's interesting. Yesterday, when we were talking, you mentioned this idea that your films, partly because you have so many of them, I guess, were functioning like your own memories, because you were able to see things, you know, see your own past through your films in a way. And I suppose that's what a one-take shot can do. It can put you in mind of just literally being there and moving in space, I suppose.
Yeah, I like this idea, I guess, of one image being so powerful that it contains all of the other images in a way. And I guess this idea, you know, we were talking about this fact that I had a funny week last week, to be honest. I ended up in a chamber, locked in a chamber for a week. Well, I mean, that was my desire. It was not a mistake. But basically, I was alone with myself and my brain. And I realized how much my brain was nowadays composed of my films. The way I relate to the past is through my own images. And I guess my desire was always to create a sublime version of my life, or a sublime version of reality. Because actually that's what I think we should really question. That's the way we should use our images nowadays, to question our reality. We know very well now, and all of you know, that images have a massive impact on the way we relate to reality. The way we see society is actually through images, and the mass media are basically doing a terrible job, because they're not subliming reality, they're destroying our psyche. We're basically living in a world where mass media are based around images of violence. And those images of violence are basically destroying more and more the social tissue of our society, the social relationship we have with all of us. And then my desire was basically, how can we use images in another way? How can we sublime reality? Because I know these images will, in return, have an impact on the way we live together. It's a very simple thing. And then that's basically what I've been trying to do, subliming my own reality, creating those like long shots, which are basically also containing all of the other images that surrounded them, in a sense, you know. And I know it's a pretty, I guess, new way to relate to memory. And I guess we are changing as human beings. We are completely changing in the way we relate to our own body, what is internal in terms of tools, what is external, you know. We have to find a balance, you know, and I'm talking a lot about this with friends because as I am studying a lot of indigenous knowledge nowadays, you just realize, oh, those guys didn't lose some things that we lost, like telepathy, for example, and so on. I have an iPhone, but those guys use telepathy. I'm like, shit, maybe I should rethink that relationship, you know? But that's a long story. That's where we are now, I guess.
What do you think about the fact that as technology has caught up, a lot of people choose to use their phones to do something kind of similar to what you do in just recording everything? What is the impulse that we all have to record things the same impulse that you've had to record things? Is there a relationship between that?
We have to be very responsible in terms of the images that we publish, I guess, very much. We have to realize that we are publishing so many images. We are all filmmakers, in a sense. I do not think we educate people towards a certain language of images, and I think we are... the language of images nowadays is getting more and more poor in that regard, in a sense. I do not mean that everybody should see all the films of Tarkovsky, even though I wish, but in a sense, we should really, really question that relationship with images and really think about anything we publish. And actually, I'm not even talking about images, I'm talking also the way we use social networks and so on. I guess we mentioned last night, we had a long talk also about the impact of basically images again on the way we relate to our social fights. And I was mentioning the work of someone that I really, really adore those days, Adam Curtis, who's basically putting his finger on the right spots. Adam Curtis is an English documentarian who's been making archival films, type of films, over quite long films. And one of his very important saying in his last film is that our society is designed to make people angry, because angry people click more and it feeds the society in return. So I guess we have to really question the relationship we have with images and social medias in that regard, and how do we basically again create another relationship with reality through the images we do. So why do we just jump on all the time and record everything around us? I think it's because we're getting excited like kids about new tools we have. Hopefully this is going to change. I'm pretty sure this is going to change little by little. But unfortunately the system, the capitalistic world, is not trying to slow down anything. It's basically maintaining this like a ratio of releasing new tools that we do not need actually, because we haven't been able to integrate the tools we had like 10 years ago already, you know? Those are extremely powerful tools. We just do not educate people to use them at their full potential, and then we have a new one on the market, and a new one on the market, and it never stops. So basically we're kind of trapped into this like rhythm, but I think hopefully people slowly are going to change the way they relate to this craziness of recording everything. Just to end up on that, a friend of mine did a very interesting film 2 or 3 years ago named In Limbo, Dans les limbes, which is a film on memory and the way that we relate to memory in the digital age, and the way that we use digital tools to record. And I really realized through that, he was interviewing a few people who record everything, you know. And I mean everything. There's a few guys just going around in their life and having something there, recording every second of their life, you know, in image. And you're like, oh my gosh, this shows so much how much we are afraid of death. It's basically related to death. We are like completely freaking out because we think death is the end. And in return, I think that's kind of like exactly why I'm exploring rituals and spirituality, because there we have another take on reality. We have another proposal. That proposal, and which is the most ancient proposal of humankind, is basically death is not the end. And there is another type of relationship we have to create with our own reality, which is like the exact opposite of where this globalized, westernized society is going, which is freaking out. Everybody's freaking out in front of time, you know?
But I guess the process of image making itself is to do with preserving a moment and avoiding or creating a form of immortality through an image. There's this relationship between why humans make art, I suppose.
The thing is that we always relate to, especially in the field that I work on, it's ethnographic and that Bulat, who's here as well, is working like recording music from so-called actually disappearing cultures. But again, that's a term I would like to come back on because I disagree a lot with this. But we tend to use we talk about Alan Lomax, we talk about also like great researchers of the 20th century and how much this is important to record. But I think we live in a very different time. We live in a very different time where actually the amount of recording gets to a point that we're creating a completely nostalgic society. We are basically obsessed with the past, obsessed with sort of like a better past, you know? We always look back and like, oh shit, it was much better before. And we're just like, really, it's getting worse and worse. And I think that's this thing that we have to turn around in a way. And I think that's also where anthropology is changing a lot those days, because it's got to face the fact that basically we are not anymore in terms of preserving only. We are actually nowadays in the mission of creating new paths, creating new forms of cultures, new forms of music, new forms of rituals. And that's basically what I'm excited about. Because if we don't create new stuff, we're dead. We're just looking back and we're basically trapping everything into boxes and looking at things with a distance, creating museums and being like, whoa, it was amazing.
To kind of rewind a bit then, when you first started making films with people from other countries, traveling around, becoming kind of a nomad. I'm interested in how you kind of started that project and if you knew what you were getting yourself into, if you like, because it seems like you haven't really stopped traveling and making films for the last 7 years or so. And I wanted to know a bit about the actual process, because do you basically make everything just on your own? Like, you must need people to help you record sound, or how does it actually work when you arrive in a new country?
Well, take the example of Russia. When last time I came here was 6 years ago. I'm going to try to slow down my rhythm because apparently it's impossible to understand me when I talk so fast. And my parents have always been telling me that. 6 years ago, I came to Russia because of that guy, mostly. And Bulat Halilov, wonderful. Thank you, brother. Pleasure to see you here, really, man. He invited me to the North Caucasus, to Nolchik. That's where he lives. And basically, we talked about doing some recordings. And very quickly, I guess, I explained to him that I could do most of the recordings by myself with his help. And so we went around for 2 months and something. We went to Kabardino-Balkaria, we went to Ossetia, went to Chechnya, went to Dagestan, went to Kalmykia, and even more. And then I was in Karelia with my friend Tatiana. And all those recordings were made in a very simple way. I mean, basically, you know, I have a camera and I do have microphones. Bulat was helping me to, of course, first thing, translate and go around. There's always this, like, very important person doing that bridge, you know, and he was sort of like channeling all this culture towards me, and in a sense he was also helping me, like, you know, basically placing the microphone in space, and there we go. And I love the accident. I love the fact that we are imperfect human beings. And I do believe that basically looking for perfection in terms of cinema especially has always been a trap to me. I never succeed to create a film that I have in mind. So I try to not have any idea and create something that has to be created, you know? It's very simple, much more like a let it go way. Just like, I don't know what the film's going to look like, but if the film wants to appear, if the film have its own consciousness, it will appear and be created, and I will help this to happen. But basically, it's really trying to not have any preconceived ideas around this. And in that regard, all the researches we made were like very, very, I mean, I remember arriving in Chechnya and then realizing, whoa, next day we're able to shoot a ritual, and then next day again, and we got invited, and we're like, whoa, we didn't really plan things much in advance. There's a little bit of planning, but not too much, to not get trapped in it. You know?
And at what point did you realize that you wanted to film religious rituals that, you know, not just music, but rituals and events that had a kind of deeper significance, or did that just happen? While growing up in Paris, and when in my 20s,
I used to go to a lot of concerts, obviously, and mostly rock, pop, indie music. And that was my relationship and my knowledge of music. That basically music was something that people play on stage while other people listen drinking a beer, you know. And I thought that was it. Basically, I was amazing, and I was like this, and I would go see a show, and I mean, amazing stuff. And be like, this is it. This is the greatest expression of music now. You know, I'm so happy I've seen that. And basically, very simply, one night, especially one night, I was in Cairo, in Egypt, and someone took me to a ritual. He was like, you want to see something forbidden? And I was like, what do you mean forbidden? It's like, well, I'm going to show you I'm going to bring you to a place where people do something that they're not allowed to do. It's a trance ritual. And it was a Zar, Z-A-R, which is a form of Sufism that you find in Egypt, Sudan mostly. And I remember entering that little street. I could hear the music coming from far, the percussion and the voices. And then I entered this place, and it was not only musically stunning, it was something else. It was basically music played for the gods. It was music played for healing. It was music played for another reason than entertaining. And it changed my life. It blew my mind because I did not grow up with that knowledge that actually music was made for that. But then I started to be on the road, and I started to really question the fact, where is music coming from? Why do we play music, you know? And then, of course, you realize, especially if you're lucky, that I had the privilege to go to all those places in a very punk way, though. Really, I was not really, I never had any money, actually, behind me to do this, but I always found a way to do it. And then you realize people play music basically to call the gods. That's basically why it's there. From the very beginning, to basically, music is there to harmonize with nature. Music comes from the fact that birds are already singing, so at some point, men had to do something in return, you know? And I think this is a very simple thing, and that relationship is still extremely present. If you look at it, in most of the music we do, sometimes, we're just maybe not conscious about that. And I wanted to explore this deeply.
A lot of your films have been made in South America. There is a huge project called Hybridas, which is all the music and many, many religious traditions of Brazil, which is all available on a really nice website, which has it all available. And I think we're going to watch a clip that's also from somewhere in South America. Are we going to watch that one?
Cool. So we start with this one. I wanted to show, we did a little selection of short films, very simple ones.
The first one is, I think, from Buenos Aires?
Yeah, so actually I wanted to start with a little film back in the days. I think it was like 9 years ago I did that one. It's part of the Blogotech Takeaway Shows project, which is this project I did with a friend of mine for some years. But I mean, on that shooting, I was basically alone, and I was spending some days in Buenos Aires. And the story goes that I got invited into a show one of the first days I was there, and things got a bit chaotic for me that night. And all I could remember the next morning was this beautiful melody, which goes like la 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 la. And I was like, who was that guy playing? I want to film that song. And it took me some days to find the guy and to convince him to do it. And then he called me actually, and he was like, okay, cool, we can do the recording. I finally found the band. We wait you in 2 hours in this bar. And I just showed up at the bar, and we did this little song. So I hope you enjoy. It's one of my favorite songs actually. Tommy Lebrero, un concert à emporter in Buenos Aires. Thanks a lot. Beautiful people. It's so simple, you know. And again, the circle, that dance, all of us together in this grand circle. There's something so ritualistic in that thing, in a way, you know. And so, and in a sense, which can like encapsulates as well very much my entire experience there in Buenos Aires, in a sense, all like compressed in one shot, in a sense.
I'm really fascinated by how you can record the sound. So sorry to ask a sort of technical question, but the sound is so rich, and it even seems to correspond slightly. It seems to be moving around. Like how do you do it? Do you have somebody setting it up separately?
How did we do it, Bulat? You know, it was very simple, right? From every time people ask me that, the first thing that I don't know. I don't know, it have to be very simple, and I never get obsessed with technical aspects. And I think the trap on many levels is that we get obsessed. We all, sorry to say, we all turning a bit like too geeky in our relationship to those tools. And in a sense, even though I think we need, as I said before, a really deep education on how to use those technical tools, we should also be, especially in the field of cinema, very careful of not getting obsessed with that too much of knowledge on the technique. When people ask me anything about camera, I have no idea. I don't know any other camera than mine, and I don't even know the name of my camera, you know? And I know it's a Panasonic camera that I've been using for many years. The same thing for the microphones. I think it's got to be very simple. I'm using external microphones, recorders, mostly Zoom, the Japanese brand, and H2N, and now H6, which is a very good one. And sometimes I'm using like lavalier mics, depending on the situation. But it's always very, very simple. Very incredibly simple, actually.
How much research do you tend to do when you go to a country? And has it, as the kind of, not so much project, but as your kind of life project has gone on, do you feel like you're looking for specific things, or do you try to avoid that planning?
Exactly. I think the goal is really to avoid any planning. So last week I was in Gabon, in Africa, in this very crazy country, and the first thing those guys, when I went to the temple, told me was that you have to fucking stop planning your life. You know, you have to let it go. That's the problem of the white world. You're obsessed with organization, you know. And I know what he was talking about, because I come from such a frame, such a way to relate to reality. And little by little, I learned about improvisation. And when I use that word improvisation, actually, I use it in a way that this is, to me, at the core of everything in my life now. Everything, this talk, the live we're going to do with Rabia, everything is like, in a sense, very carefully prepared on some levels, but to the point that it allows you this complete freedom on the spot. And that's the way I can like try to research. By basically having access to a lot of information, doing a lot of, asking many questions to people everywhere I go, and then switching to the fact that basically, okay, now let's see what happens. And then magic happens, you know? And really magic happens in a way that you are like attracted to this place or that place without really planning it. People invite you in the most amazing things. And this magic happens only if you're really able to let it go at some time, you know? So it's kind of like this funny game. How do we like step on that? We have to, at least for me, I had to find this balance, and I'm still working on it, you know? And working more and more towards sort of like freeing myself from my intellectual relationship to reality, trying to shut off the brain, basically.
We're going to have another clip. Well, let's talk a little bit about Russia. And you have traveled to all kinds of places around here on several different trips, right? You've come back.
No, actually, I came to Russia first time 19 years ago, and I did actually. I wish I could have shown that, but I'm not gonna have time. Basically, let me check. Actually, it's not too long. I did my very first photo work in Russia. It was in '99. Or I think so, or 2000. And I came to Moscow with a friend without really having no idea, except we wanted to go to Vladivostok. And in a magical way, we find a way to get into the train, and then we traveled for like 10 days towards Vladivostok. And I did my first work there at the time, actually.
So did you know what you were going to find there? You
No,
just went there?
We had no idea. We were completely like, we were very lost at the time. I was 18, I guess, and I was like, oh my God. I was discovering the world. It was my very first big project. I'm not sure I'm going to find this anymore. I don't have it here. Anyway, I will give you the link. All my films are on my website, actually. And then I came back 6 years ago. And then, as I said, with Bulat, we traveled a bit in the Caucasus, in the northern Caucasus, which is a place very, delicate in a way for the Russian mind, I guess. Very little explored. In terms of music especially. So we felt very much, it was an incredible adventure. We discovered so many things there on the spot. And then I traveled and I did a few other films over 3 months. But I guess I made like something like 25 films over 3 months. So I did a lot. And
just as a pause,
yeah.
I think I read that over the period of about 6 years, you made something like 50 films a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Can you just explain how that's possible? What do you? I mean, obviously you often filming in one take, so that's editing is a little bit easier. But in terms of being able to keep that up, I mean, do you seek to keep making that many, or is it that you have so much stuff that you just have to make?
I've always been trying. There's a part of me who wants to slow down, and another part who do not want. A lot of people around me are like almost like worried about that, like, come on, you have to slow down, you have to stop making so many films. The thing is that that's my way to relate to reality, to put it very simply. It's not a job at all, even though I do make a little bit of money on this now, very little. It's basically my way to live, my way to kind of like engage in a social moment and live an incredible adventure. And so I do not really want to slow down those adventures. I want to keep having them. And I don't know, just like I work a lot, and I guess I'm very organized, so I'm able to kind of like, actually go from one project to another. This summer I made like 4 films differently, one after the other. One in Corsica, one in Calabria, one in the Faroe Islands, one in Berlin, and it was incredible. It goes very, very fast, and it's very demanding, but it works very well like that.
What do those films mean to you once you finish them? Because when you're making so many, do you come back to them regularly, or how do you kind of relate to them after they've been made?
It's interesting. So basically, the first reason, maybe I should have started like that, but basically why do I make those films is I want to create some very beautiful memories for the people that I film, right? So the first thing is that I give back the films to the people I filmed, especially in the Híbridos, the Brazilian project, where we made 99 films actually over 4 years, and plus a long feature film and plus many other things. We sent back all the films to the people we filmed, asking them for comments and critiques before publishing them. So it took a long time to get the feedback from everybody. But for me, it was very important to find that balance. That basically, I want to create maybe it's like, this old-time family portrait, or maybe like this troubadour. Imagine like a photograph troubadour going from villages to villages, documenting life, and basically giving a photo in exchange for a meal, So I guess it's basically, I was really, really excited about finding that balance. How can we reworked, there is this old term of like potlatch, for example, which is a very beautiful indigenous term from Northern America, which means this type of exchange in between tribes, where you would give something, then the tribe will give something else a little bit more important, and again and again and again. And so going back to this type of sharing, which means that basically I do not pay the musicians that I film. I'm really trying to convince them to do these recordings for free, but in return trying to also explain very well why I'm doing this, And it creates a very healthy type of relationship, I think. And that's what I loved with all those people I've been filming. And then I publish, obviously, all the films on internet, and I do not promote them. I do not really do any promotion of my work for different reasons. I cannot really go into details now. But basically, I like the fact that they circulate in a way or another. Some films are not going to be seen at all. Some others are going to hit 1 million views without me noticing, But they have their own life, and I really like that. It goes with the flow in a way, And again, I do not really show my work in film festivals or so on. I'm just trying to use alternative ways to celebrate all this richness that we have created as humankind as a whole. And in a sense, per personally, then the fact that I'm playing live now is a way. That's the way I've been rediscovering my own films, actually. Yeah, and because when I play live, I edit them live and mix them in an improvised way, and every time is completely different. So tonight I'm going to play with I prepared 150 films. So I don't know how many I'm going to play, probably like a third of that, and going to slice them and edit them very fast. And it always creates a new story, and I love that.
So it's like a DJ with their record bag. They choose 150 records to bring, and then you can just mix them together.
And every mix is always different in such a way, And again, I think also it's the live experiment, which is obviously for me the most exciting part of what I'm doing now, is also really based on the fact that I do disagree a lot with what we call storytelling, especially in terms of cinema. There's basically for the past 5 to 10 years, under the influence of TV and TV series, cinema has become something else which is extremely based on storytelling and basically the efficiency of storytelling, which is basically how much you're going to captivate your audience from beginning to the end. And I think this is very effective and it works very well, and we see that. And the success of Netflix is obviously a way to show that I guess there's a lot of desire to get trapped, But I do believe that we need so much to rethink our images in a different way, because I do disagree a lot with storytelling in terms that it is actually the tool of the system very much to get trapped again. It's a relationship to time that Matrix to explore. And in a sense, when you go into rituals, into spirituality, into indigenous knowledge, you realize that people do have a donor relationship to time. It's not a timeline. And cinema, since the beginning, has been based on the timeline, And I still have to go through the timeline to edit my films. And that's a limit, in a way. And I want to think about a way, how can I work away from the timeline? How can I work away from the beginning, the middle, and the ending? How can I work in this constant movement of images and sounds? And that's why I do explore also a lot of installations where there is films going on multi-screens for hours and hours, and there is no beginning, neither ending. It's you, as a human being, who's going to have your own experience. And I want to create those, basically... settings where people do have something extremely intimate in relationship with those images.
Well, on the theme of circles then, do you want to show the next film?
So, I'm gonna show a little extract of it. I'm gonna start playing the music of it now. So it's part of a series of a few films we made with Bulat in Chechnya, and I named it The Great Jihad, because I will explain you after. Sufi rituals from Chechnya.
Can you explain a bit about what was going on in that scene?
Sort of quickly, but basically such rituals are happening, as we discovered, very often. And basically a family would throw up a ritual, organize a ritual, mostly related to the celebration of the death of someone. And I do not remember who was getting celebrated, but I guess someone who died in the family 1 or 2 years before. And basically it's sad. So there is obviously then the same, in Islam, the person gets buried the day of his death. So basically there is zikr happening right on the moment of that, just after the person dies, and then a year and 2 years and a few years after, depending on the importance, sense of the person's, there is celebration of its memory in such a way. So this is basically the main part, which is named the zikr or dhikr. Obviously this goes for a long time. I guess it was going for an hour, probably an hour and a half, non-stop. And before this and after this, there is prayers. And what fascinates me with Sufism, because I've done a lot of research on this mystical part of Islam in different parts of the world, from Indonesia to Ethiopia to Morocco, and is that they have such an incredible diversity of ritual, diversity of basically transcendental tools in a way, And we often, when you think about Sufism, we always have this very lovely version of the whirlwind dervishes from Turkey, but this is very much related to that part of the world. In other places, as you can see here, it's very different, and people do not have much knowledge of those. And especially when you talk about Chechnya, when people think it's like radical Islam living there, which is not, absolutely not actually. It's very mystical Islam.
And all of these projects, I suppose, as you've gone on, it's you exploring all the kinds of music that are so divorced from anything like an entertainment industry. It's all to do with music as a ritual, and particularly this idea of like entering a trance that becomes it pops up frequently in all of these places that you go to, these kind of experiences where people kind of leave their own bodies almost in a group situation.
Because for me, I think it's very important to kind of like, to put it very simply, I'm interested in like, how can we trance again? How can we recreate in the Western world as well, this relationship to something that we all did at some point, you know? We all come from that, and I think, again, I think we live in a very, very complex time in terms of identities. To put it very simply, I think we're getting trapped in seeing the world as a division of identities and cultures. If you sort of like go back a bit more in time, rewind a little bit to the point that we all come from the same place, and basically we've been simply, and in a way that's the greatest lesson that those guys in Gabon, for example, last week told me, is that you fucked up with this idea of like basically divisions, and you're all fighting all against each other. You don't realize it's all the same thing. Everybody's doing the same thing since the most ancient times. It's just took different dresses and different singing and different sounds and colors, but it's all the same stuff. And now our mission nowadays in this society is definitely to basically bring it all back together and to realize how much, well, we have to take it easy and step back a bit on that and unzoom on a larger scale, in time especially, realizing that we are not going anywhere by basically treating the world as separate identities and people doing different stuff and that you cannot touch in a way. You are you little white people going to Africa, doing recordings with those guys. I'm like, fuck, I am myself basically saying hello to those guys, trying to unify and getting towards trance. And because what is the trance is basically this most ancient tool to reach towards something away from your ego, obviously. And our society being trapped into an intellectual relationship towards everything, we are getting completely fucked by the ego. And that's why I think that rituals on many levels, many different forms of rituals have to be re-implemented and sort of like recreated almost to the point that we all trance again and we all re-access that direct knowledge, you know. And again, you see, I'm not talking about a religious relationship, because religion have been doing the exact opposite in a way by taking us away from the transcendence, by basically organizing this relationship to a God that you cannot touch. In the rituals, in those, like, even in the Sufi rituals, even though they will not and never use the word trance, basically people are reaching a level where they let it go. They let it go and something else goes through them. And of course, the project I've done in Brazil was very much based on that, because Brazil is the ultimate trance country. Everybody trance in a way, you know, from carnival to candomblé. Everybody uses crazy techniques to basically get out of their mind. And I think that's what we need to make a better world.
Astonishingly, we've got about 6 minutes left. So I think it would be better to have some questions than to show a clip, even though we have another clip, because all the clips are
No,
online.
but I think it's fine, because I will show a lot of like things related to trends after in the live show. So maybe we can have a few questions to hand up on. Okay.
Does anybody have a question? There is a microphone going around. No? If not, then I was going to ask you very quickly, anyone? If you could explain why you make all your work available for through Creative Commons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very simple. I think that basically there is something you learn as well in many of those spiritual traditions. Even though I don't use the word traditions much, but let's say a spiritual lineage or something. I will take the example of the Santo Daime Church. The Santo Daime Church is an incredible and very unique form of organization in Brazil, which have not even 100 years old. We call it the Ayahuasca Catholic Church. It's basically a Catholic sacrament using ayahuasca at the core. It's very beautiful rituals. I'm probably going to show something after, during the live show about that. The Santo Daime is very unique, especially because their music, the music of the Santo Daime keeps evolving constantly, and it's very beautiful, it's very refined, it's very unique, it does not correspond to anything you've heard about coming from any church. And what they say, they say that they receive the songs. Basically, they do not write down the songs. Let's say over one ritual, you will sing the book of Mestre Irineu. But it's not the book of the songs by Mestre Irineu, the master who created the doctrine. It's the book of songs that he received, and it's made very clear. What I mean by this is that basically, you do not create anything from scratch. You just remix something which was there way before you and which is going to be there after you. Basically, you're just there to tune that frequency and maybe turn it into something more beautiful, or at least maintaining the vibration of beauty, right? So what I mean is that there is nothing you're the owner of. The whole idea of the copyright that is so much present in our society now is completely wrong in relationship to where this is all coming from. It's an idea which is basically sustaining a system which slowly is privating ourselves from freedom and from free access to this gigantic knowledge that humankind have been created. And then this whole copyright thing is very much related to a specific moment in time where we were basically trapped into materiality from films themselves, the roles of films, to basically vinyl and CDs and so on in music. Comes the digital age. What is the digital age? The digital age is the reawakening of spirituality, because basically the digital tools allow you to copy without limit the same thing without losing quality. This is basically exactly how spirituality works. This is the way it goes. Knowledge can be copied and shared for free forever. There is no limit to that. So basically, obviously, why Creative Commons comes in the game at some point? Because at some point, this guy, Lawrence Lessig, and a few other guys, just like realize this is going stupid with copyright now, because we are not allowing people to fully express their potential and to fully share to another level. And I really believe that we have to get to another level. We have to get better at it. And I mean our society have to get better at it. Artists have to get much better at what we're doing. We're not good enough. We really have to get better at sharing stuff, at creating new forms of music, new forms of everything, and trying to create new forms of hybrids, especially in between art forms. And then Creative Commons and open source licenses are exactly there for that in a way. And that's why I'm very interested in the hacker movement as well, because this is where we have to go. We have to hack the machine, because that's what the shaman have been doing from the most ancient time. This is the same stuff, you know, and it's not just funny parallel. This is it. This is the reawakening this is the archaic revival, as McKenna used to say, you know. This is where we are in time. It's like we are now realizing that those ancient tools, the shamanic tools, are not old stuff. They're stuff coming from the future. We have to use those ones, combine them with those things to make an amazing form of living together. And we're just at the beginning of it, and we have to get better. It's coming.
It's a lot of things to think about for the future. Vincent will be playing lots of his films very shortly as part of the live cinema project. So stick around and get to see more of these incredible shots. So thank you very much to Vincent.
Thanks a lot, Charles. Thanks to you. Thanks to everybody at this beautiful place. And I hope you're going to have a wonderful night. I'm sure you will, actually. I will try to be with you dancing. See you soon.
Thank you.